Bueno, pues aquí estamos, aquí seguimos en esta fantástica WordCamp Online España 2020. Espero que os esté gustando. La verdad es que la estamos viviendo, yo creo que todos con mucha emoción. Está habiendo mucho contenido muy interesante. Y ahora, en este momento, tenemos pues uno de los momentos más increíbles de la WordCamp, porque vamos a poder disfrutar de una sesión de preguntas y respuestas que mucha gente estaba esperando, que mucha gente pensaba que era una broma cuando empezamos a hablar de ello, pero no, es una realidad. Para esta última parte del segundo día de WordCamp España Online tenemos a dos invitados muy especiales que protagonizarán, como os decía, una sesión de preguntas y respuestas. Por una parte, tendremos a quien será el conductor de la sesión, Matias Ventura. Matías es ingeniero y diseñador de Montevideo, en Uruguay. Trabaja en Automatic y es el líder del proyecto Gutenberg. Seguramente el proyecto que más ha cambiado WordPress en los últimos tiempos. Bienvenido a WordCamp España Online y gracias por acompañarnos, Matías. Es un verdadero placer tenerte aquí con nosotros.
Muchas gracias, Pablo. Es un placer para mí estar acá con ustedes. Y bueno, a ver cómo va esto.
Seguro que muy bien. Además de Matias Ventura, también nos acompaña Matt Mullenweg, cofundador de WordPress y su líder de desarrollo actualmente. Matt es el CEO de Automatic, una de las personalidades más relevantes a nivel mundial del sector tecnológico. No es la primera vez que Matt está en España, en una WordCamp, porque ya participó en WordCamp Europe, que se celebró en Sevilla. I was saying in Spanish that on top of Matias Ventura, Matt Mullenweg is also here with us. He's co-founder of WordPress, lead developer, CEO of Automatic, and one of the world's most relevant people in tech industry. Matt, this isn't your first work in Spain, right?
I think my first time was even before it was a WordCamp in 2006. I went to Seville,
WordCamp Europe.
It's an amazing event, yeah.
Great. We want to give you a warm.
Stuff on my wall is from there.
Yeah.
I think this and this, I think, are actually from Seville. Yeah, it says on the back. So, like, I still have mementos from that trip, and I would love to return once we can all travel again.
Beautiful. We want to give you a warm welcome, as we are very happy to have you here with us, and we hope you will enjoy the session. Thanks for joining. I'm going to explain how is this session going to work, and we will start shortly with the first question. Decía que le estaba dando una calurosa bienvenida a Matt porque para nosotros es un orgullo, por supuesto, tenerle aquí. Os voy a explicar muy brevemente cómo es el funcionamiento de la sesión. Estos días previos, desde que anunciamos la presencia de Matt y de Matías, hemos estado recibiendo por parte de las personas registradas en el evento una serie de preguntas que pedimos. Entonces, vamos a empezar con unas preguntas que quiere lanzar Matías y a continuación empezaremos con una selección porque no recibimos casi 100 preguntas y no nos da tiempo a hacerlas todas, pero como había muchas repetidas, hemos preparado varias de ellas para hacerlas directamente a Matt y que Matías, si quiere, pueda participar en alguna. E intentaremos, si nos da tiempo, poder meter alguna de las preguntas que podéis ir haciendo también en el chat de YouTube. Si nos da tiempo, como os digo, las meteremos. Ha comentado antes ya Materrón que en esta sala la sesión va a ser en inglés. Es probable que surja en algún momento alguna frase o alguna declaración de Matías Ventura en español, pero aquí lo vamos a hacer en inglés. Si queréis ver una versión doblada a castellano con traducción simultánea, tenemos una compañera que va a estar traduciendo simultáneamente, podéis pasaros en el track B, ¿de acuerdo? Tenéis todos el enlace en la descripción del vídeo. Y nada más, yo creo que con esto ya, Matías, damos paso a la sesión, lo dejo todo en tus manos y vuelvo aquí dentro de un ratito cuando acabemos. Muchas gracias.
Dale, chao. Okay, let's do this. How are you doing, Matt?
It has been an interesting time, for the world, for WordPress, for myself. So I would say it's had some really fantastic ups, some really challenging downs, but all in all, it's been exciting to see, in a lot of ways, the progress of the world. Trends that were happening already be accelerated 5 or 10 years. Especially around distributed and remote work. So I hope that we can continue to accelerate some trends around WordPress and open source at the same time.
Yeah, that actually leads me to something I wanted to ask you before we dive into the audience questions, which is even this event, I don't know, I think like the numbers I heard were like over 5,000 people registered, which is pretty amazing.
Wow.
so we're doing some of this. I think it's great that the community came together to organize these online events, which at the same time feel like it could sort of involve more people than regular WordCamps. So my question to you is, as things go back to normality or some degree of normality, what do you think that the WordPress community could maintain or develop in these online events that could be worthwhile doing?
I mean, by definition, WordCamps were always exclusionary, right? If you couldn't make it to be in a physical point at a physical time, you couldn't be there. And, the tickets were cheap, but travel and other things, cost could be expensive. So what I love is, to our mission of democratizing publishing, if we can radically open up some of the value of WordCamps, not just the talks, right? Because the talks you could always watch later online, but some of that person-to-person connection and relationship building that would happen at WordCamps. Mm-hmm. If we can recreate that online, I think that could be something that would be amazing for the WordPress community. I feel like we used our in-person events as a crutch, actually. So because they were so good, and I love them, and we overweighted towards them. And so this time allows us to reflect and also try some new things that we might not have been pushed to otherwise. And I hope that we don't stop any of these new things. I hope that there are more WordCamp events in every language. I love that you have 5,000 people registered for a Spanish one. That's incredible. We need more of that.
Yeah, I think even early this morning, Riyadh, one of the core committers from the Gutenberg team, did an open Zoom session in the core editor Slack, just building pull requests. I think it was for adding like categories to block patterns. And that was like an open session coding from start to finish and involving everyone there. I think that was pretty powerful. So I would love to see more of that too.
It's so cool. It's like esports for programming, right? Like you get to see one of the world's great JavaScript developers working on Gutenberg live, and you can tune in and ask them questions. And that's, in hindsight, it seems silly we weren't doing more of that before. And so I'm glad that this woke us up. You could imagine a future where the big WordCamps are organized not just around region or continent, like we've done them so far. WordCamp America, WordCamp Europe, WordCamp Asia, but around language.
Yeah. Okay, let's get going with these questions then. So if Pablo, can you send me the first one? Okay, this is already in English, so this is easy. Automatic has invested on Frontity. Does it mean that React might be implemented in the public part of WordPress? It could be awesome.
It's a good question. First, I'll say that I'm excited to be able to support Frontity. Also, Automatic tries to support as many of the WordPress ecosystem companies as possible. So I would say that if there is a company doing something interesting in WordPress, we would love to invest and support it. In terms of a React theme in default WordPress, I think that, to me, that stays in plugin and theme territory for the foreseeable future. The downside of that approach is, of course, that you lose all the capabilities that, the decades of WordPress plugins and themes and integrations and everything when you move to that more decoupled React frontend. And I don't know if what you gain is that much better for a normal content website. In fact, so many of the single page applications in React, when they get to version 2 or 3, usually work on server-side rendering. We have server-side rendering by default. And it's really fast and really good, especially when you layer an AMP or some other things that can speed it up. It can actually be, I think, probably the best possible thing for content-driven sites, the best practice, versus application-driven sites where something like React might be better. If you took a really optimized PHP-served AMP page, performance-wise versus the same thing going through React, it's hard for me to imagine the React page being faster. In fact, I think it would be much slower. So that's how I think about the defaults. But for people more advanced or building more advanced applications or have some sort of constraint on their website where they need that more, the React front end, I think that the decoupled use case of WordPress is stronger than ever. And I don't know why anyone would use a proprietary backend like a Contentful or something like that when you have all of the open source security, scalability, and robustness of WordPress available in a decoupled infrastructure as well.
Cool. I think that's a great answer. I share a lot of those same sentiments too. I think like the fact that WordPress might explore a lot of these technologies in the backend doesn't necessarily mean that the front end needs to also adopt them. I think that the document model of web pages has been very robust and very fast, like you said. So yeah, and server availability as well, like being able to run WordPress almost anywhere. Like this other, like running React on the server is not trivial. So it gets into some of those hurdles.
I have a weird request. Could you repeat that in Spanish? Just so everyone listening could hear like your native version of it.
Yeah, of course. Estaba diciendo que me parece que comparto mucho lo que dice Matt en relación a que si por un lado WordPress está adoptando React en el backend para, bueno, el editor obviamente, pero en otras partes, eso no necesariamente se sigue que el frontend también tenga que adoptarlo. Está buenísimo que Frontend esté explorando todo ese territorio, como Gatsby y todas esas cosas, pero a la vez el modelo de documento que tiene la web, básicamente, funciona muy bien y es añadir el layer de React en el frontend trae muchos problemas de server rendering, de indexación, un montón de cosas que el usuario normal por ahí no lo tiene en cuenta. Entonces, es interesante ver un poco las dos partes.
Cool, thank you.
Okay.
It's helpful if you don't mind doing that sometimes to
Yes.
because we have a primarily Spanish audience here. So, let's utilize the fact that you're a fluent native speaker.
It's fun. If we go long enough, you'll end up speaking in Spanish and I can end up in English. So
yeah, we'll switch. I took enough years of Spanish lessons that I should be able to.
Nice. So the next question is by Ivan Barreda, and he says, when will we have a multi-language in core?
One of the things we presented is a multi-year roadmap for where WordPress wants to go that we talked about as 4 phases of Gutenberg, because Gutenberg is the future of WordPress. We are in phases 1 and 2 right now. So phase 1 was replacing the editor, essentially. So taking post and page content and allowing a block interface to that allowed people to do and create things by just pointing and clicking that previously they would have needed to code. Phase 2, which we're in the thick of, as Matias can speak to, is taking those blocks and allowing them to customize your entire website. So this, sometimes called full site editing, kind of reimagines what themes could be to allow that degree of customizability in the entire website. Next up are phases 3 and 4. And I anticipate these, in our previous roadmap, were going to be next year in 2022. Phase 3 is what I call multiplayer mode. So imagine real-time co-editing or the editing interface of WordPress being naturally collaborative, much like Google Docs is. And phase 4 is the answer to this question. So that's taking the content models and the blocks and everything we've created, which by this point will mean editing the entire website of WordPress, and building in a native way within WordPress to reflect multiple languages and translation status. And as soon as you go to multiple languages, it makes everything much, much harder, maybe even an order of magnitude harder. That's why we're saving it for the end, but we want to do it correctly. So, to put a year on that answer, I'd say 2022 is when you'll start to see some of that either in core or perhaps as a canonical plugin, much like Gutenberg started as, where there'll be like an official plugin that people could use for this.
Yeah, I think that's going to be very exciting. I struggle to choose whether to post in English or Spanish, so when that comes around, that will be fun. Exactly. Okay, next question now. Carlos asks, if there are plans to integrate blogs in taxonomy pages and archive pages. I assume this is from the template hierarchy. So,
yeah. Do you want to go for that one? Maybe in Spanish?
Sure. Sí, claro. La fase 2, como describió Matt, que se está centrando ahora en básicamente en traer los bloques a todos los distintos rincones de un tema. Eso incluye las páginas de archivo, taxonomías, y poco la idea es que el full site editing es como un entorno en el cual todos los templates que el tema define, eso incluye la página de 404 de error, la página de archivos, la página de categorías, etcétera, todas van a poder estar descritas a través de bloques y así se van a poder editar. De hecho, si instalan Gutenberg, ya pueden empezar a probar con algunos themes que lo soportan, a ver cómo, un poco qué desafíos, qué cosas funcionan bien, cuáles no, y dar un poco de feedback. I was saying that there are already some themes that are doing that in sort of like an experimental phase in the repository. If people install the plugin, they can already start playing with it and giving feedback, which is super useful to figure out how to do things.
Cool.
Next question.
That's a good one.
Yeah, these are pretty good questions. Elba, what do you think about the future of page builders like Divi, Elementor, etc. when Gutenberg has full site editing capabilities?
Yeah, I'm really excited for the future of page builders because before, every single page builder would have to do a fair amount of work just to recreate their version of blocks. And every single page builder did their own version of that. So there was a lot of wasted effort of many talented and great developers all over the world, essentially rebuilding the wheel or recreating the block over and over. Now that we have these kind of rails and core of this block infrastructure, and it's being widely adopted and implemented with thousands of blocks being created and many more to come. Now they don't have to make that kind of core fundamental infrastructure and it can instead innovate on top of it because there's so much cool stuff that you can do in page builders still that is, I think, out of scope for where we want to take Gutenberg. So that's my personal excitement with it. I do think that if a page builder decides to not go a Gutenberg compatible direction, that they'll probably be used less and less over time because there's just too much of a user benefit and a community benefit to that common data structure, the portability, and also the integration with other plugins. If you're building a plugin that integrates with the post content, you're going to build it for Gutenberg. You're not going to build it for every single page builder or theme out there. No matter how popular they might be, they're never going to be as popular as WordPress core. So seeing this fragmentation, we almost had a Tower of Babel problem before, where each plugin was speaking its own language. And so by creating a common framework for them all to use, I think that we'll be able to focus that energy into just a better experience for both WordPress users and then subsequently the visitors to their sites.
Cool, thank you.
Anything you want to add there? Or?
Yeah, I think I don't know if I think Genesis launched something today around that as well, the Genesis framework. Yeah. So I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see the how sort of, because there's always again different decisions that people can make on how to interpret page building or site editing, especially if you have different audiences, more advanced audiences or more niche audiences. I think there's room for a lot of different takes on things as long as we share this sort of common ground and compatibility layers.
Totally.
So that's cool. Okay, Leonardo asks, which parts or characteristics of WordPress right now would you say are terrible or that they should have been improved like yesterday?
Ooh, while I'm answering this, Matias, why don't you think of one you can answer in Spanish? I really want to improve the social side of WordPress, particularly commenting. To me as a blogger now for 17, 18, 19 years, the comments have always been the best part of blogging. And I've always appreciated when a great discussion can happen in the comments, or I make new online friends, or I learn something. And more often than not, sometimes the comments are teaching me something or correcting a mistake I made. So that interaction to me is part of the magic of blogging, and I can't imagine going without it. Now, the commenting interface in WordPress is functional, but I feel like we could do more to invite comments, to engage commenters, and to allow more follow-up and sort of awareness of for the blogger of what's going on. Just to give a very simple example, like maybe perhaps a view which shows me all of the comments on my site that I haven't replied to. Or after I reply to a comment, perhaps give me an opportunity or a link. It can just be a mail to link that lets me email that person and say, hey, I just replied to your comment. Let's invite people to create gravatars more when they don't have it, because that personalizes it. All of these things I think could be pretty low-hanging fruit and simple, but really enhance both the commenter and the blogger experience of those social features. So that's my first answer. And for number two, I'll say something that I'm pretty sure we're getting to relatively soon, which is how media works. Both, I think there's some improvements that we can make in core. I'm also excited about some things that are coming in Jetpack to integrate things like free media libraries like Pexels or Creative Commons, or integrate your Dropbox or Google Photos. Like, I think there's some cool stuff we could do there, both in core and from a SaaS integration point of view.
Cool. Hay una que tengo yo que de hecho Gutenberg la mejora un poco, es cómo las galerías antes eran enteramente dinámicas, y el hecho de que ahora puedan ser también estáticas quiere decir que funcionan en un montón de entornos distintos, como RCS o email, en esos lugares. Y después sí, algunas de las mismas cosas, creo que colaboración y permisos de usuario y cosas así que no fueron pensados desde el comienzo para eso, que se podrían mejorar bastante.
Gran pregunta.
Yes. Okay, Fernando asks, what do you think the future of themes is going to be when this can be created with Gutenberg and blocks, which is already in beta? And there's another part to the question. And it offers an editing experience for the full site comparable to those of Divi or Elementor.
I'll tell you what I'm hoping for there, which is that we start to see more unique aesthetics, as in more visual directions reflected in themes. So themes have to worry less about the structure and can focus more on the style of what they're presenting. I feel like we've gotten to a point where many of our most popular themes are of a similar 2010s, modern web aesthetic. You can imagine it. It's the buttons with the outlines and the sans serif fonts. And I kind of want some more weirdness, some more unusual aesthetics there. Like, for example, what would be the best theme for gamers or fans of the artist Lisa Frank, or people who love Frank Gehry or Monet, Rothko? Like, what are the different kind of visual styles and movements that we can draw upon, and allowing people to express their personality a bit more through their sites, which I think we're entering a decade where that will become more and more important as the social networks dither and change and optimize their business models. That home on the web, where it's truly expressive of your personality, your values, your aesthetic, is going to become more and more important.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think the I started my sort of theme journey, like hacking around at Kubrick.
In español?
Yes, and que empecé, yo empecé un poco editando Kubrick. Creo que los temas se han vuelto en un sentido bastante más complejos desde entonces. Si vemos toda la historia desde Kubrick, Sandbox, Toolbox y cómo pasó después a los 20s, creo que una de las cosas que puede traer este sistema de full site editing es un poco, de nuevo, democratizar más y abrir un poco más la puerta a que usuarios nuevos de WordPress puedan interactuar con los temas, puedan crear sus propios temas usando el editor y por ahí tengan una entrada a desarrollo más avanzado. Es como, creo que es una forma de empezar también que puede ser muy interesante.
So are you saying we need the Gran Gradiente Azul again?
Yes. Yeah, we
That was my take from your translation.
Sí, precisamos traer de nuevo el cover block para que imite el gradiente de Kubrick.
Totally, we could do it now.
Yeah.
It's all built in.
It's one of the things that I first demo now. It's like it's all going back to Kubrick. Okay. Juan Hernando says, if you could magically change or improve only one thing to WordPress in a second right now, what would it be?
Ooh. Do you have a first answer there?
Well, there was one I mentioned, but it was like for the previous question. About like it was about galleries.
Let's define it as outside of the current roadmap of Gutenberg.
Yeah.
Oh, I have one.
Okay.
I would love native GraphQL support in WordPress.
That's a good one. Yeah.
That's my magic wand away. How about for you?
Yeah. I don't know. Like I'm so immersed in the current roadmap that everything goes there, I guess.
Oh, how about the theme directory? I'm trying to think of things we've talked about before.
Right. Outside of the software itself.
Yeah.
I think I would like
everything, like go crazy.
Yeah, so I'll briefly say it in English and then switch to Spanish. But I think like being able to, like with full site editing, being able to publish themes directly to the directory. So like a user that, even if they don't know like PHP or JavaScript or CSS, they can create a theme just using the editor and share it and publish it, like the same with block patterns. I think those, like that sort of making that, allowing people like easier access to publishing and sharing things there would be pretty cool. Y en español, lo que decía era que me gustaría que se pudiera, incluso usando cosas como el full site editing, que se pueda directamente publicar un tema en el repositorio, o los block patterns, los patrones de bloques que todavía no sé, eso hay que hablar, Fernando, si estás por ahí también después, hay que pensar qué término se va a usar en español para los block patterns, si se va a usar patrones o qué. I was saying, like, I remember that we don't have a great term yet in Spanish for block patterns. There are some options, but I'm not sure if they are the best. So we need to settle that.
Maybe we'll coin it in this talk.
Yes, I think
pattern?
It would be patrones generally, but I think it doesn't hint at the same sort of design background. So I would actually like prefer designs actually in Spanish, like diseños.
Is there a word? One of the implications of pattern was actually from like fabric patterns.
Yeah.
If you were to say fabric patterns, what would you say?
It's patron, I think, and trama could also be. Trama is more towards the fabric, but I don't know if it fits very well in the kind of uses that would need. Yeah, it'd be fun to figure out.
Well, calling all Spanish poets. I was actually just thinking about this morning, where all language is a fragment of reality, right? It never fully captures it. So as soon as we put something in the words, it changes it and it freezes it at a point in time. And we have the same concept we're talking about in two languages, and it's impossible to translate perfectly because the English version is a fragment of reality and the Spanish version will be a fragment of reality. And there was, I think it was Krishnamurti who said, if you teach a child the name of a bird, it will never see that bird again. And I was thinking about that with blocks, actually.
Yeah. Now that's really interesting. I always lean to the inherent metaphorical nature of language, because we tend to ascribe metaphors to those that are explicitly metaphors, but fundamentally, all words are just metaphors. So that's
that's what's so beautiful about blocks as well, is it allows us to reduce the number of metaphors we're asking people to keep mentally when interacting with WordPress. We've talked about it before, but it's worth repeating, is we have metaphors of shortcodes, which kind of existed as text. We had widgets, which are more like grabbable and you can move them around, but they were totally separate from others. And then themes would sort of register these widget areas. When you think of what people, well, I was going to say 5 years ago, but let's say today, have to learn to use WordPress, it's a lot. And I really am looking forward to, now that we're almost 20 years in, we finally figured out how we can simplify some things and take the base commonality between all these different concepts and find the essence of it that now is repeatable across everything we do.
Yeah, and I think that's also something that the different communities, like the different language communities, can also contribute to core as well, because a lot of these conversations about words and about even poetry, they can come from all these different languages, and perhaps there's ways to find those essences in a better way. Okay.
There's a word for it as well that I'm forgetting. I think it starts with an E, for a word which is untranslatable into other languages. Do you know that one?
Not from the top of my head.
No, I'll think of it in a moment.
Okay.
It's like Udoia or something. There's a website that collects all these.
Okay, the next question is by Ivan, and it's, are there going to be native security measures taken in core? Until this day, WordPress still doesn't have basic systems by default, I think changing the URL from the admin side, or restricting the number of failed logins to avoid brute force attacks.
Yeah. This is such a fascinating area, because you have to play chess, not checkers, right? Or you have to maybe play Go, and you have to think 2 or 3 moves ahead. So for example, if one reason we've avoided putting some sort of brute force protection into core is that it would be both slow and ineffective. So you could very easily, on every login or login attempt, generate a write to the database, which would then invalidate some caches and things like that. And that that blocking, presumably on IP address, would be local to that site. So it'd be very easy for a spammer with 100,000 IP addresses, and IP addresses are cheap, to just hit you once a day even. They could still hit you once a second with 100,000 different IPs, but you'd only see any individual one once a day. So you really need a more network approach to anything like that to be truly effective. The most important security that we have in core, and one that we're improving significantly with the next release of WordPress, is updates. So, all software is written by humans, or at least all of our software, and humans are fallible, so we create bugs, and some category of those bugs will have a security implication to them. Now, for those security bugs, there's nothing that we could ever do to anticipate every possible class of them and prevent them in some repeatable way, except just being adaptable and updating quickly. This is true of every platform that came before us. It will be true of every platform that comes after us. So the updates that are coming to core, I think will probably do the most to increase basic security of WordPress, the auto updates coming to core, than anything we've done. And I'll also take this moment to thank Webhost, because that Webhost had pushed us actually for several years now, both for core and plugins and themes, doing auto updates, I think is the largest reason why you don't see these stories as much anymore of many WordPresses getting hacked. Really, all you see it for is sometimes a plugin, and more often a theme that might have a security problem in it, because those are hardest to auto update. But this is way better than it used to be.
Cool. Thank you.
Oh, I found the word. It is eunoia. And
Eunoia.
Sending that to me.
What is that in Spanish?
EUNOIA. And there is eunoia.world, which has a list of these, so you can click on all of the ones coming from a certain language. So if I type in Spanish here, let's see what they come up with as an untranslatable word.
Yeah.
I have any Spanish ones? That's a bug. Maybe I'm not using the site right.
And it's a Greek origin. I don't know if we have it in Spanish as a term.
So here's what they say is an untranslatable Spanish word, which I apologize for my pronunciation. Estrenar, ESTRENAR, which they define as the experience of wearing something for the first time. Is that accurate?
Yes, yeah. Estrenar un vestido o una prenda.
And since we were talking about spammers, the one more they have is chingada, an imaginary, horrible place where you send all those who annoy you. Wow.
I think that one might be from Mexico or Central America. Okay.
I'll have a link for this in the chat. There's
that. Yeah, that'd be fun. Jose is asking, what is the present and future of the REST API in WordPress?
Present and future of REST API. By the way, as I pasted that link and saw the ugly URL, I'm like, man, this site needs to be on WordPress. We can make it so much better. /language/Spanish, But the present and future of REST API. The most amazing thing that's happening currently with the REST API is we're using it ourselves. So Gutenberg is built on the REST API. And in developing that, we've actually made a ton of improvements to it. And this was surprising to me because the REST API was a popular plugin for several years before we brought it into core. So I would say that, for the future, when we bring APIs in, I want to make sure that we use them ourselves first, what I call first-party usage, either in WP admin or our mobile apps. The WordPress mobile apps are amazing, and you also check them out if you don't use them already. But some of that first-party usage will really help us understand the edges and the limits and find any possible bugs with the APIs. The future is expanding that. So as we make more of WP admin API powered, expect to see the REST API evolve in a similar manner. I mentioned GraphQL earlier, only because I think that as we develop more sophisticated usage of the REST API, we may start to run into a case where it's not the most efficient way to get all the data or the set of data we need. And so it's really just, I don't think that's an issue right now, but you could definitely imagine, 4 or 5 years from now when everything's built on the API, where that extra performance that we could get from a GraphQL approach to be worthwhile. So that's definitely something I've been thinking about. At that point, we might move the REST API or the XML RPC API into a plugin and break that out from core It's just a plugin that gets auto-installed, but a site could remove if they wanted to.
I think even right now, I think we're making a lot of improvements to the navigation menus, APIs from the REST API, just to power these next phases of Gutenberg. So there's a lot of work going on in there. And in the Eunoia thing, I found like Empalagoso is one that always, like, I don't know how, if you have that, like, too sweet in English. That's a great Spanish word.
There's a kind of a phrase in English I use sometimes, like, "Oh, you're giving me a toothache," you know,
Yeah.
like your tooth is aching. It's so sweet.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Rocio is asking, what other business options do you see in the future of the WordPress ecosystem?
What other business options? That's a tricky question because there's so much today already.
Yes.
I do believe that options that are being created are, first, Gutenberg will open up WordPress to so many more people than could use it before. It's not out of the realm of possibility over the next decade to imagine another billion people being exposed and using WordPress. So that would open up opportunities for every part of the ecosystem. But particularly folks who could help someone get started with WordPress, teach them it, and set up kind of a framework, the first version of their site, and then teach them how to use blocks to evolve it as they see fit. In terms of new things, I'm very, very excited by everything moving to blocks. It's pretty much, I'm not going to say every plugin in the directory, but like that's, a majority of them probably should and can be blocks, and in fact have a much, much better user experience when they become blocks. So that reblockification of the WordPress ecosystem, which will happen over the next few years, has already started, but will really gain momentum in the next few years, is an opportunity to reimagine every interface, every concept that we've taken for granted in older plugins, and do so in a way that'll be accessible to a vastly larger audience, and accessible in every sense of the word, in that it will be, natively responsive, so that it'll work well on desktop browsers or on smaller screens like mobile browsers. It will be accessible in that they will be able to inherit all of the accessibility technology and improvements we're making in Gutenberg. So they'll be able to, take advantage of everything we do around keyboard navigation and other things to try to open up WordPress to that audience. So these are very, very exciting to me.
Yeah.
I don't know, Matias, what's on your mind in Spanish?
Creo que sí, que los bloques abren un montón de oportunidades para cosas que antes no estaban del todo definidas y sucedían en el backend o en el frontend. Creo que incluso cosas como Frontity son posibilidades nuevas que pueden surgir. Y una cosa interesante me parece que va a ser con los patrones de bloques o los diseños de bloques y con los estilos. Me parece que hay que, de nuevo, ya no sé si conoces, pero hay varios plugins que ya están, como Editor's Kit es uno que se ha mencionado bastante. Hay otros que traen distintos diseños de distintos lugares. Entonces la parte de Page Builder creo que va a tener mucho movimiento también. Okay, is there any roadmap to upgrade the jQuery version, or, in my humble opinion, to move from jQuery to vanilla JavaScript?
Ooh. Are we still using jQuery in core?
Yes, in places.
Probably for some of the Ajax stuff or comment moderation. Yeah, making that vanilla JavaScript would be awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know who asked that question, but we'd love to accept patches around that if you want to get involved.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like there's been some upgrades, like security upgrades, of course. But yeah, like everything that any contribution to try to move away, we're still relying on, and also I think the biggest issue is plugins relying on it. We already faced that in trying to bring blocks into the widgets and bring blocks into the customizer. That there are a lot of widgets that are relying on JavaScript or things and conflict with the way that the new things work. But it's like one step.
Are jQuery's upgrades not backwards compatible? Is that why we can't upgrade?
I think I think they follow some versions. So I think like some versions like break things. Yeah.
Good to know, and thank you for that suggestion.
Yeah. Sergio is asking, if you could go back in time, which step in the development of WordPress you wouldn't have taken during those years?
What step? I might not have brought the REST API in when we did. Just knowing that there were still some improvements that we could still have made to it, I think would have made its introduction stronger. That's a more recent one. If I go further back, we had some false starts around themes and just how the theme directory works in general, that I think I would do differently, knowing what I know now, to allow the design side of WordPress to both have more flexibility, but maybe less code diversity, meaning like a lot happens in themes that really should happen in core or plugins. And so would have probably changed where those lines were drawn, or where we encourage those lines to be drawn with our core software. How about for you, Matias?
Cool. I just thought of like meta boxes, which has been a bane in my existence for some time. I mean, they accomplish a lot of the things that you couldn't do because we didn't have a block editor in the first place and structured data. But it's a very painful user experience, I think, at the current moment.
It would have been nice to have shifted to a fully JavaScript WP admin back in the day.
Yeah.
It's always going to be hard to do, but it's one of those things I wish we had done 10 years ago versus possibly in the future.
Yeah. I think we still have a few questions left. Anna is asking, when will there be, this is related to what you mentioned, when will there be a new design for the dashboard of WordPress, for the admin of WordPress?
I don't know. I'm not too tired of our current design yet. I'm, I think, more interested in updating some of the functionality on the screens and the design of some of those subpages than I am of the Chrome or the colors or the icons or the font or any of that. I feel like we have some good basis there, and I'm just more excited about changing some of the functionality and the UX in the design right now.
Yeah. Cool. Another question from Mariano. Do you think that Gutenberg is going to be gaining ground in WordPress in a way that replaces older PHP code? And would WordPress become Gutenberg? Is the way to modernize older code in WordPress? Is that the way to modernize?
I'll give a short answer. Are you up for doing a longer one in Spanish?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, this is very much the intention of allowing things that were previously in the customizer or the widget screen or all the different ways you would edit posts and pages to be inside of Gutenberg. It's a way for us to reimagine those interfaces. And though while those screens might be low as a percentage of the number of screens in WordPress, they are the most used and the most important. So I would say even just getting editing into Gutenberg brought probably 60 or 70% of the value of WordPress into the Gutenberg way of doing things.
Cool. Sí, bueno, una cosa que me parece que está bueno aclarar, que me parece que Gutenberg nos permite simplificar un poco y tener una distinción, como una dicotomía entre lo que es el panel de administración propiamente dicho y todo lo que tiene que ver con cómo se ve el sitio, o cómo personalizar el sitio, cómo editar el sitio. Creo que esa división que implica, bueno, absorber widgets, absorber todo lo que esté vinculado con los temas, y por otro, porque hay cosas como, no sé, la lista de órdenes de producto de WooCommerce, por ejemplo, que no tiene sentido en bloques necesariamente. Entonces me parece que lo que va a ayudar es a diferenciar un poco como las dos funcionalidades más grandes de WordPress entre lo que tiene que ver con el contenido y lo que es administración.
Cool.
We still have 10 minutes and a bunch of questions, so I'll keep going.
Cool.
Javier is asking, what is your opinion on the tendency to use WordPress just as a backend and then use technologies such as Frontity for the front end and only communicating through an API? And there's another part. Is there anything in the roadmap around this sort of vision?
Yeah, I mean, we want to improve the APIs that these are using, both with REST API and perhaps like GraphQL in the future. So I would say that, yeah, that's an important use case. I do not foresee that being the majority or even above a few percent. So I think of it more as a agency or advanced developer edge case. I wouldn't recommend it for most users of WordPress or even most websites, but for a small percentage, it is the best way to do things. People who are, have a commercial interest in Jamstack or these other acronyms, I think try to sell it as a panacea or something that cures all problems or is a more modern way of doing things. I think it's actually a huge trade-off that can be worse than using a standard WordPress theme in many, many ways. But once in a while, 1 in 100 times, you should do it. And we want to support that.
Yep. Next question by Ahmed. What is your opinion of the online WordCamp experience? Do you think there should be both forms to be continued even after the quarantine is over and life can get back to normal?
Similar to what you asked in the beginning. This is, I guess, only my second one. We did an event around WordCamp Asia, and this is the second one I'm joining. I'm excited about being able to speak at more virtual WordCamps than I was able to when they required flying around the world. So personally, I'm excited about this format. And like I mentioned earlier, I could definitely imagine some language-centric native language events becoming maybe even far bigger than any of the regional WordCamps ever could have. A downside to me of WordCamp Europe, Asia, and I guess US as well, is that they were primarily in English. And that's fine for me. That's all I speak. But so much of the WordPress community, so much of the WordPress world, so much of the world in general might be more comfortable in another language. And so that's why I really appreciate you all inviting me and the incredible work that the translators are doing, trying to translate my gobbledygook into Spanish. And thank you, Matias, for answering some of these questions in Spanish. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah.
And my only regret there is that I can't do it natively yet. So
one day. Okay. Oh, this one is coming through another channel. What are automatic plans for the Sensei product?
Sensei is under active development. For those who don't know, Sensei is a learning management system, or LMS, where you can design online quizzes, courses, basically things around online education on a plugin for WordPress. It's not the only one for WordPress, but it's the one that we produce. And I'm very excited about it. I think we're in an interesting time right now. I think it was Naval Ravikant put it pretty well, where he said, imagine every university in the world trying to convince their students that they should pay their normal fee, which could be $50,000, $60,000 a year, for online courses for a year. And then going back and saying you now need to pay for coming back in person. So it's almost like being forced to sell your competition's products for a year. That's happening right now. I think that we're all going to find the limitations of the existing software out there. And much of the software in the education space, I find very clunky. And I think there's a ripe opportunity for a WordPress approach, WordPress openness, and the WordPress GPL code to improve online education around the world. And wow, that to me is very motivating as a mission as well. It's hard to imagine something more important for the future than investments in education.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're running into the end of it.
Ooh.
Yeah, this was fun.
Matias, any closing thoughts?
I feel like there's so much going on and happening, and even through the struggles that are going on through the world, that it's very exciting to be involved in this community. So, yeah, no sé, agradecerles a todos, a los organizadores, de poner este tipo de eventos y compartir todo este conocimiento y unir a las personas. Me parece, no sé, está muy bueno y me entusiasma mucho.
We have to finish him because we are running out of time. Thank you very much, Matt and Matias. It has been fantastic.
Forgive me. Gracias por invitarme y mirar. Un placer y honor.
Muy bien.
Very well, very well.
Thanks
a lot, Matt. Thanks a lot. You have talked about exciting topics. It was very, very interesting session. We hope to see you again soon at another event in Spain. You will be very welcome. Thanks for coming. Thanks a lot.
Adiós.
Muchísimas gracias, decía, les estaba dando las gracias a Matt y muchísimas gracias a Matias Ventura, que ha sido un conductor de la sesión fantástico. La verdad es que ha sido un placer poder contar con él. Un lujo, creo que estamos todos de acuerdo. He estado siguiendo un poquito los comentarios que poníamos en Twitter, en los chats. Sé que ha habido algún problemilla que otro con el sonido. Creo que se ha entendido perfectamente y quiero dar las gracias también a Cristina Millana, la traductora que ha estado en el canal B haciendo la sesión. Ahora mismo, si queréis, en el canal de Zoom del Track A va a entrar Matías y podréis preguntarle alguna cosita si queréis, hacer un poquito de networking. Os recuerdo que todas las charlas, si vais a 2020.spain.wordcamp.org/feedback, podéis dejar un poco la valoración de todas las charlas, incluso de esta sesión que hemos tenido ahora. Todos los comentarios que vosotros vayáis poniendo allí después son moderados por la organización y se envían a los ponentes, pero no se publican en ningún sitio, no son públicos, con lo cual hay un cierto nivel de intimidad para esos comentarios. Esto se acaba hoy aquí, pero mañana hay más. Recordad que mañana volvemos de nuevo a las 4 de la tarde con otra ronda de sesiones apasionante en los 2 tracks y todavía nos queda la tarde del sábado, que de nuevo a las 4 de la tarde tendremos el Contributor Day. Ya estamos preparándolo todo, estamos cerrando todo el contenido, todas las mesas y una ocasión fantástica para poder aprender a colaborar con WordPress y para los que ya sabéis colaborar, a trabajar de manera eficaz, eficiente y sobre todo compartiendo pues vuestra sabiduría con todas esas nuevas personas que esperamos que se acerquen. Muchísimas gracias por habernos acompañado aquí. De verdad que ha sido un auténtico placer. Creo que ha sido un momento histórico para toda la comunidad hispana del mundo de WordPress. Estamos muy contentos. Esperamos volver a veros mañana aquí a las 4 de la tarde. Un saludo. Hasta mañana.